Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Sports Den, or The Sports Den, right? I always get the name of this podcast wrong,
The
James.
Mexican Sports Den, the Den of
Something,
Sports, whatever you want to go with, man.
whatever. Yeah. I am the sports editor, James Barron. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Will Weber, over here. So another
Will Weber and Will Weber.
and we are in the throes of our high school football tour, James, which we're nearing the finish line. Thankfully, because it's funny.
We're almost there, man.
We sit around all summer wanting something to do, and then we have something to do, and then we start complaining about being overworked.
Overworked, yeah.
Going to all these football practices is exhausting.
Like, oh my God, another one?
Yeah. Well, we're recording this on a Tuesday. We'll both be at city schools today. James, you'll be over at Santa Fe High. I'll be over at St. Mike's. The previews for the Demons and the Horsemen come out later this week. Of course, they're the last two that we usually do, just because those are the big draws in town.
They're the two big ones, yeah.
Yeah, we started with the Union School today, which ran Tuesday. Capitals comes out tomorrow. Look, we've been everywhere. What's been your highlight of the football tour so far?
Oh, my highlight's got to be the scrimmage on Thursday with Taos, Milwaukee, and Capital. It was nice to actually see something that resembled football as opposed to what practices generally are. It gave me some good insight. I mean, obviously, I think Taos is going to be pretty solid. Milwaukee, people are sleeping on Milwaukee. I think that's kind of my sleeper team this year. That's a team that's gonna be my ride or die. Just for advance notice here that I'm pretty high on them, and I'm anxious. I'm cautiously optimistic to see what this weekend is like. We've got the two city schools, the public schools, Santa Fe High and Capital, playing each other to start off the season. We'll talk about that a little bit here in a second, and then obviously we got St. Mike's and Taos, which actually I think is probably the best. I mean, it's probably the best game out of the lot. Maybe next to Espanola Los Alamos, just because both of those teams went deep into the playoffs last year. But I think Taos and St. Mike's have legitimate shots at going deep. Obviously, St. Mike's, they're the two-time defending state champs. They're the team to beat in 3A. But Taos is going to be tough. Taos is going to be tough to beat down the stretch here later on in the year. So. So I think that's going to be a really good game if people really want to check that out.
Yeah, I went to Los Alamos and Academy, watched their scrimmage, and of course, look, I've known Garrett Williams. You and I have both known Garrett Williams for a long time. It's hard to believe he's in his 16th, 17th year, something like that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Los Alamos football is kind of what the Pittsburgh Steelers are in the NFL, where they just don't go through a lot of coaches. They get a guy and they stick with him for a long time. You had Bob Scott before him, and then now Garrett Williams. And Garrett is an eternal optimist. Got to love the guy's optimism. Every single year, he could have 3 returning players with varsity experience, and he's like, I really like this team.
Yeah.
He really likes this team. So, they're a team that made the state quarterfinals last year. Of course, it was surprising. They were a 5 seed. Remember, all year, you always kind of projected them as like an 8, maybe a 7 seed, because the Southern District – in Class 1, it was just, even this year, the top 7 teams in the preseason rankings are all from the same district down south. And everyone looks at the North District thinking, well, Los Alamos and whoever else wants to join them. So LA's kind of got that.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they're playing with a chip on their shoulder, and they feel like they can do it. Of course, they lost a really good quarterback. Kyle Evanhouse is gone. He was had a vertical game to him, could get out and run. It'll be interesting to see how Los Alamos bounces back. But no matter how well you do in 5A, you're always dealing with the Artesias and the Goddards and all those teams down south.
Roswells and now you have the Southern schools and Deming and Gadsden. I mean, Gadsden. It's amazing to see what happens when you finally get them out of that 6A black hole that they've been in for years, and all of a sudden, they're a legitimate football program. Yeah.
So in some ways, kind of you kind of want to root for Los Alamos just because they have such a huge uphill climb for them. But it was funny. I felt the same way. Of course, anytime you walk into Albuquerque Academy's campus, it's like going back in time, because they have the rolling green berm hills around there. It's all filled with grass, and there's oak trees that are 50, 60 feet tall. It just feels like you
feel like you walk back into like the 60s or 70s, huh?
In a different time, in a different era. The clouds roll over. You feel like you're in New England somewhere.
But it's still nice, man. I mean, it's unlike any other campus on it. I would say in the state. There really isn't one that kind of compares to it. So you walk in there and you're like, wow, These guys have money.
Yeah, well, and that's why Max Preps, they put out that ranking last week with the top 20 athletic programs in the entire country, and the listed academy is number 13 in
the
the
nation.
entire country, which kind of makes sense because they do have money. They're not particularly dominant in a lot of sports, but they are just good at everything. And so,
except tennis, they boys tennis, they absolutely crush it.
Tennis and swimming,
20 years now.
Oh, yeah, tennis. Yeah, it's every year this since we started counting years with a 2, they've won the state championship, I think. So maybe St. Pius snuck in there once,
maybe
a quarter of a century ago.
I don't even recall that.
Yeah, but yeah, academies. It's one of those places where if you haven't been there, you got to go down there and see it just once because it's just a beautiful. Look, the fence around the campus is worth more than some schools. It's like you got these brick cistern things with wrought iron.
It's a small campus, but it's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, just the plot of land that it's on. I mean, it's just, you got all that dirt and everything off to the south and even back to the east behind it. There's a lot of room for it to grow if it ever wanted to grow. But, the actual campus itself is, relatively small compared to what you see with most other 5A schools or even 4A schools. So
yeah, when your campus is big enough to hold 2 state championship events for tennis and cross country, you're doing some things. Actually, swimming too. They host swimming there.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, enough about Albuquerque Academy.
Yeah, I think we've spent more time on Academy than we have any other school.
Yeah. Well, we both had a chance to visit some of the city schools. I went to the Indian school last week. You've seen Capitol. I'll tell you about my impressions of the Indian school. Is first of all, look, you can wax poetic all you want to about the chemistry that they're trying to build there and the cohesion and all this stuff, but there are 2 things that jump out at you when you're talking about the Indian schools. One is they're an independent, so they're automatically ineligible for the playoffs, no matter how good that team is. They're not going in, or they're going to play a 10-game schedule, and that's it. And as optimistic as you want to be, it's got to be hard if you're an athlete to know that you don't really have an end goal for the season other than to play well and not get hurt, because you're always kind of looking for the playoffs. Yeah. But now they're trying to play the role of spoiler. And 2, they're looking at rejoining district next year. They want to get relegated down to 2A, so they join the McCurdy district with Navajo Prep and those schools, which if they have a bad enough year, you go 1-9 again, which would be their 4th year in a row they've won 1 game.
They won 1 game, yeah.
They will more than likely be relegated into 2A next year, because if they go right back into 3A, you're just going to get pounded, because you'll have to rejoin that district with Pewaukee and St. Mike's and West Las Vegas and Robertson, and it won't be good. But no, they're trying. Yeah, and that's the thing is, Bones, you and I both know Bones Segura, the Capitol graduate. He played some semi-pro ball. He's as energetic, as optimistic as you can get. And the thing that really struck me about him is this is a guy who has really just adhered himself to the culture of that school, because we've seen coaches go in there before where it's really difficult. They want to coach a football team, but you're coaching at a boarding school of Native Americans, and they're all from different cultures. And it's hard to do that when they've all got their own rituals and traditions and stuff. They're not going to show up for camp every single day, and that's just the way it is.
Well, and we talked about it before. Every football coach worth their salt, and actually I think every athletic coach will tell you that the summer really is the time where you create, your state championship teams. They're not built in November or December. They start in the summer, and for Indian school, that's the problem. In the summer, that campus is closed down, and you can't get those kids that you need from all the different pueblos, and some of them are they live 200-300 miles, well, not 200-300, but at least 2 or 3 hours away, so they can't readily get there for workouts and things like that. So he's rather limited in what he can do. I think what he's tried to do as far as holding the different workouts and trying to get some of the kids in southern pueblos there, down in Santo Domingo, San Felipe, in those areas, getting them up to the campus to work out, and then obviously trying to find a way to get some of those northern those kids in the northern pueblos some opportunities to work out. It's nice, but at the end of the day, you don't really get that cohesive unit that's usually out there. I mean, you talk about coaches, they're big on numbers. They want to see 30, 35 kids, if not more, out in the weight room, and when you're having to break it up like that, it's kind of hard to get that kind of consistency that you really need, because one group might be good, the next group might not, and you don't necessarily get that that same level of work that you need to improve and get better and get stronger. And that's where Indian school is always going to struggle.
Yeah, it's interesting because the city of Santa Fe, you got one team that has absolutely no chance at the playoffs. They're automatically eliminated. So
Yeah.
that's one. You have a team that's kind of theoretically eliminated from the playoffs for Santa Fe High, which there's really no chance they're going to make, but they're at least, maybe if a bunch of teams forfeit, they can get into the tournament. You just never know. Then you have a team
they're not going to use that. Yeah, they're not going to use that for fodder now, are they?
And just say, look, I'm just trying to be honest.
I
And
know.
then you have Capital, which has a puncher's chance if they get a few things to break their way. Capital might be able to sneak in. And then you have St. Mike's, which is they've a 20-game winning streak, the two-time defending state champion. They're looking at the fourth straight run to the state finals, or fifth year in a row.
Fifth straight time, yeah.
Yeah, so there's an interesting dynamic. There's a stepladder process for the entire city, but the Capital, look, you and I both know Capital and a lot of kids there, and you kind of want them to do well. And I think if they can figure out their offense, if they can get their line to play well, look, they get a couple of breaks, a couple of turnovers, this team maybe has a shot.
Maybe, but I think the bigger problem is that it's kind of John Michael Salazar is kind of hitting the reset button here. I think one thing that, maybe he's kind of gone under the radar a little bit is that he's got, I think, 43 kids out. And out of that group, he's only got 15 upperclassmen. So he's trying to compete with sophomores and freshmen. And that's not a winning recipe. Those kids, they're not quite as developed. They're not as strong as the older kids. And especially along the line. I think this year he's going to have 2 juniors and 2 sophomores on the offensive line. And having 2 sophomores, you've got sophomores that are capable of being able to do that, but that's asking a lot. And then, they get pretty young on the defensive side too. So they're probably going to struggle a little bit early on. But if he can keep those guys working and grinding and get them to improve and get better, this team could surprise people by the time they roll around to October. And for them, they got to do 2 things. They got to run the ball and they got to take care of it. Because if they can't do one or the other, it's going to be a long year. Defensively, I think they're going to be okay. I think they showed it last year. It was funny, even though they went 2-8, their defense only gave up, I think, 236 points last year. So, you're giving up 23 points a game. In high school football, that's going to keep you competitive for the most part, and they were. But they just couldn't score, and that's what they need to do. They need to be able to put points on the scoreboard. If they can score, 20, 25 points, they're going to have a shot at maybe getting into the playoffs. But if they can't do that, if they can't crack that 20-point barrier, it's going to be a rough year for them. But I think if you give this group, if they stick together, I think in maybe 2 years, maybe next year, maybe the year after, I think you'll see this program get back to where it's competing in that district. And hope, and honestly, I think the bigger issue is, do they move up to 6A? Because if they do, then that kind of throws a wrench into everything, because they did a nice job competing in 6A when they were there a few years back, but this isn't a 6A program, and they're not built to compete against the likes of La Cueva and Sandia and El Dorado, if that's the district that they're in. But even to that end, if it's Rio Rancho or Cleveland on the other side, in their district, forget it. They've got no chance in hell of competing with those teams. I think 5A is really where Capital needs to be, and honestly, that's where Santa Fe High needs to be. And the unfortunate thing is that they're just big enough to be a 6A school, and they're going to be on the bottom end of that. And it's going to take a couple of years for Adrian Gonzalez to get that program to where it's competitive. And that's not to say that they can't. If they win 3 games, that I would consider that a successful year. And if they don't get, blown out a lot, you're going to concede that La Cueva is probably going to be one of those games where you're going to get hammered, and maybe El Dorado, because El Dorado's gotten better, and possibly Sandia, just because they've got some good young talent, and they've got a new coach there, Tylen Wilder, the former Espanola coach. They should be really good. Other than that, I think they're competitive against some of those other teams. Against the Albuquerque Highs and the Atriscos and the West Mesas in that district. But they've got to win those games, and that's been their big problem, is that they haven't won those games when they've had an opportunity.
Boy, you say I was given a bulletin board material. That was pretty good bulletin board material right there.
Yeah, but it's like you said, it's a harsh truth. I think I would like to say mine's a little more nuanced than yours. You just said, hey, they suck.
Well, I'll say this: like, if you're going to compete when you're outnumbered, when you're outgunned in a
Yeah,
lot of ways, when you just don't have the athletic ability that some of these other schools, the depth that these other schools,
exactly.
you have to do something off the beaten path. You have to do something different and create your own niche, like run the triple option or go full vertical game and just air it out, run the no
Yeah,
raid, air raid
or punt on third
offense.
down. I
And
don't know, just
look,
something different.
yeah, you've got a coach who has got an offensive mind. Who that's what he made a name for himself at coaching at West Las Vegas.
Yeah,
It
Andrew
is
Gonzalez.
that guy. If he can figure out a way to push the ball downfield and keep games, just do something that makes them difficult to prepare for. Like you see
Yeah,
it all the time in college football. Air Force, Navy, and Army are just a nightmare to prepare for, even though they don't have the size, they don't have the speed,
yeah,
because they run that triple option, which you can't really simulate in practice. And if you can do something different at Santa Fe High, kind of create your identity based off that, you can surprise some teams. And that's that. Can they do that? Can they pull off? It's literally like pulling a rabbit out of a hat for them.
it is. It is, and for them, I think, and it's interesting because I think for both them and Capital, it's the same thing. They got to be able to run the ball because I don't
Mm-hmm.
think they've got the ability to throw it. Not because they don't have the quarterbacks who can, but it's just the skill players here at the 6A level or even at the 5A level. It's a different animal. When you're going up against a lot of those Albuquerque schools, those teams have, they have good athletic, kids,
Mm-hmm.
athletically capable kids like that can run past you. And Santa Fe High, they don't exactly have that. They've got good athletes. I'm not saying they're not. I'm not saying they're bad. They're good athletes, but when you're going up against really good athletes or even elite level athletes, you got to have some elite level athletes, and that's what they don't have. And so, like you said, you've got to figure out a way around that. And the easiest way to do that is if you run the ball and can keep teams offenses off the field. You're going to be in games, and maybe you can catch a break here and there if you get a turnover. Um, a pick six that gives you the ability to kind of kill the clock if you've got like a 7 or 8 point lead, and that's what they need to do. You're not going to sit there and score 30, 40 points because they just don't have that ability to score 30 or 40 points.
And then the last team we haven't really talked about yet is St. Mike's, the defending two-time defending champs, coming back in with a roster that's got a lot of experience. They've got a quarterback who played quite a bit last year. They got a line that's not quite as big and burly
Yeah,
as it used to be, but they walk with a swagger there. They played a little bit differently, and all the stars are aligned for them. They play 7 of their 10 games inside the city of Santa Fe this year. They don't have to travel a lot. And so, look, they get a good first test with Taos, which I think is the best thing that could happen to him. Maybe
yeah.
have somebody knock him off at some point. That way, you don't have the specter of that winning streak kind of hanging over you. Because
It
I
starts
don't
to
care.
become a bit. It becomes a bit heavy after a while, right?
Yeah, then it becomes like you're not just playing an opponent every weekend. You kind of got like a half of an opponent sitting out there with the winning streak that's
Hmm.
still keeping
Because you
seeping
don't want to
along.
be that team that loses, right?
Right,
So,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
they do have the ability to run the table, but I think at some point during the regular season, whether it's West Las Vegas, Milwaukee, Robertson, Taos,
Yeah,
somebody's going to
somebody.
knock them off eventually, and that eventually could prove to be a big thing. But yeah, it'll be fun to see St. Mike's, just to see what they have, just to see how they respond to the pressure and all that on
Mhm.
Friday night.
Okay, well, I'm going to go in the other direction since you just poo-pooed Santa Fe High. Let's just be honest. Who's gonna play St. Mike's in a 3A title game? Let's just throw it out there right now, because I
Man,
mean,
I
I
mean
think everybody
Dexter.
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
Dexter's
if
got
it's your rematch,
they have the best
I agree
quarterback in
with
the
that.
state. Yeah, Dexter might have one of the best all around athletes in the state at quarterback. They did lose a lot of their guys from last year, but Dexter is coming back. They came within one failed fourth down stop of winning the state championship last
They
year at
did.
Ivanhead.
Yeah,
When everyone kind of expected them to lose to Robertson in the semifinals, they almost pulled off the northern sweep. They had to go on the road twice last year in the playoffs into fairly hostile environments, and they darn near pulled it off. So I think they're
well,
a
they
team
almost did.
it's got laser focus. I really like West Las Vegas, but the problem is West Las Vegas hasn't really shown the ability to throw the ball vertically yet. If West Las Vegas can develop, like they've got a solid running game, they've got a solid line. If they can somehow push the ball downfield, the passing game, they've always had a decent defense. I think West Las Vegas can make some hay. Look, you and I both know Milwaukee's they've been a slowly building
Slowly evolved. Yes.
yeah, and Milwaukee, took that step last year where they got to the playoffs. They went and played Hatch pretty well in the first round, and they did well enough to where there's a real sense of optimism, which is really unusual because last year you had Poake and Espanola, two teams that are historically awful, and they both took giant steps last year, which was just crazy to watch. This is probably one of the best storylines that came out of all of last season is watching Poake and Espanola do well at the same time. And it kind of takes me back to week 1 of last season when probably at the time it seemed like a monumental upset when Los Alamos gets beaten week 1 and you're thinking, wait a minute, they lost to those guys. But it was
they were definitely for real, and that definitely showed over the course of the rest of the season. And I think for Pewaukee, the big thing is going to be health. They're not going to have Jonah Villegas to start the year. They might have him. They're optimistic that they might get him before the start of the district season, but they've got some good talent around them. I mean, Josh Gonzalez looks like a guy that can throw the ball. He can run it a little bit, and Zeke Villegas, the head coach there, is taking a little bit of the playbook out of Coach Bill Moon's offense, where they want to run the ball and they want to be able to control the clock and everything. But I think he also wants to be able to throw the ball a little bit more. He's not going to sit there and run the ball, 30, 40, 50 times and go student body right, student body left. I think you're going to see some diversity in that offense. But I think they've got the ability to put up 25, 30 points a game and be a really tough out. I think the team to really watch is, and they're out of our area, but Nimi, I've heard from a couple of coaches and a couple of people, they've got some kids that came in, being a boarding school, that you're always going to get kids transferring in, transferring out. I've heard they've got a couple of kids that are really athletic and they've got the bulk of that team that's coming back. They should be right there in the mix for that. So I think there's probably I'm hearing about 4 or 5 teams right now that you could say in 3A feel like they have a legitimate shot at playing St. Mike's in the championship game. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we're sitting here, assuming that St. Mike's is going to get there, but I don't think it's going to be as easy for them to get to the championship game like it has been the last couple of years. Although, I mean, let's be honest, even the year that they won it, I mean, they needed a miraculous comeback against Raton in order to get out of the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
So, it's not like they've actually had an easy time of it getting to the championship game the last 4 years. They've had to fight a little bit. And I think this year is going to be a little bit more like what we saw maybe in 23 or even 22, where they're going to have to scrape and battle a little bit to get to the championship game. But I mean, you look at that championship pedigree that they have, and a guy like Joey Fernandez, you don't bet against guys like that.
Yeah, you bring up a good point with Nimi. You see it all the time where they'll be horrible at baseball, and then all of a sudden one year they show up and they're really good. Soccer, tennis, some of these sports, they just come out of nowhere, and for 1 or 2 years they're just kicking everyone's behind. Exactly. So they're definitely one of those teams that can kind of, if there's any team that can reinvent itself overnight with guys you've never even heard of, it's New Mexico Military.
There's your team right there. So but I think those are 4 teams right there. And we haven't even talked about Robertson yet, but I think everybody's kind of taking a wait and see approach to kind of see how the first 3 or 4 weeks play out. I know there's some enthusiasm about, how they look. And I think this is going to be a little bit more of a balanced offense than what we've seen because they've relied so much on the Gonzalez's, whether it was Matt Gonzalez or Jesse James. Those guys basically, they were their ride or dies for the last 3 or 4 years. I think this year it's going to be a little bit different, but you can't discount Robertson just because they're still Robertson and there's still some pretty good talent there. It may not be to the level where it has been the last 3 or 4 years, but that's the kind of team if they stay disciplined and they do the little things right, which I mean they've always been known to do. They'll definitely be in the conversation when we get to November.
Yeah, Robertson always needs a really good quarterback. Every good Robertson team in the past has had that guy that can just carry the team, no matter what his physical dimensions are. The guy has the ability to move that team up and down the field almost at will. And you've seen every different body type that has come through there. Like RJ Ortiz was a big, tall, athletic, strong kid. He's just one of the better high school players we've seen in a while. And then you have the Gonzalez kids who are not very, very big, and you wondered how in the world they could throw the ball with those little tiny hands and their tiny hands,
but they managed to pull it off.
They would run through a brick wall with their hair on fire for you.
They would. Yeah, they do.
Yeah, that is Robertson's style. But what we'll do is we'll take a break. We'll come back. We're going to talk about this weekend's games, maybe make a few picks, and really, really start to make people angry by picking winners for this week.
There we go.
Just do that. you think it was bad throwing some teams under the bus in our tour recap?
Let's just start picking who our favorites are, right?
Let's just let the fur fly, man. Let's just do that. Then they'll replay this thing on YouTube inside the locker room and before a game. Say, go prove these guys wrong. But yeah, we'll take a break. We'll come right back and finish it off. All right. Look, high school football games start Thursday. We have Cuba and the Union School. That's the season kickoff for us in this area. And then Friday, you have Demons Jaguars and Horsemen and Taos. So a number of games. So what we're going to do is, if we didn't give enough cannon fodder before, we're going to go ahead and
we're going to roll right into it.
Yeah, we're just going to start picking teams left and right. And then, as always, during the football season, I put out my picks for every single week, which really makes people mad. So
don't sit here and pick one team one day and then change your mind and pick another the next.
Yeah,
people are going to call you out on that. You know that.
Just understand it's a very unscientific method of which uniforms I think look nicer sometimes. So, in fact, I used to pick Milwaukee just because they had those really cool uniforms with the helmets of the elk antlers on the side, which I thought were some of the best high school uniforms I'd seen. And they got away with them. Now they're back to like the standard P on the side. It's like, come on, really?
Actually, they've got the two-tone.
Oh, that's right.
With the green,
which is even worse. In fact, that should be a story for us: is who has the worst uniforms in high school football? Because there are some really bad ones out there. Anyway, that's for a different day. Instead of making people upset about the laundry that they wear in the field, let's talk about the games that are on the field. So let's start Thursday night. You have the Union School hosting Cuba. Last year, it was Santa Fe Union School's only win, I believe. They beat Cuba in week one.
Yeah.
You're thinking, you know what?
They lost 9 in a row.
They lost 9 in a row. They scored 50 points in their last 9 games. So it was tough sledding for those guys afterwards. Who do you have in the week one opener for us?
First of all, why you got to bring up old stuff, Will?
Yeah.
I mean, this is 2025, man. Just because they didn't score last year doesn't mean they're not going to score this year.
That's true. It's a different season. We're trying for triple digits this year. So let's. Who do you have?
They're still not going to score a lot of points. I mean, let's be honest. Yeah. I'm probably going to lean toward Indian School because they are the home team, but it's probably going to be like a 13-6 game or maybe 20-12. That's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, which they did a couple of years ago. Remember that game was just brutally ugly, and they did the same thing. It was a very low-scoring game where no one could kick the ball. It was like score a touchdown and go for 2 because it's like, oh yeah, I forgot there's a kicking element to the football stuff that we haven't even tried yet. But I do like Bone Segura. I like what he's doing over at the Indian School. I'm going to pick the Braves in this one. Cuba was a team. I'm picking them not to just win like by 1 or 2 points. I think they win this thing like I'm going to say 26 to let me throw a dart against the wall here. Throw spaghetti against the wall to see if it'll stick.
What a weird number. Go like 11 or 8.
26 to I'll say 18. I say they score 3 times and fail to convert every time. 26 to 18. I'm going to pick the Braves to win their season opener. That'll be the most points they scored since Bill Moon was the coach. So there you go, 1-0 to start the season for SFIS. Now, look, Friday night. Let's save the big one for last. We'll go Demons Jaguars. We'll start with St. Mike's and Taos. Who do you have for that one?
You can't go against St. Mike's.
I mean, you can go against St. Mike's. You kind of
I think St. Mike's will win, but I think it's probably going to be a 30-28 game. I think Taos is, they've got some size up front. They've got some really big kids. They've got some good athletes. Evan Salazar, is probably, in my mind, I know Zeke Viegas is gonna lobby for Josh Gonzalez as the best quarterback up north, but I think Evan Salazar might be the best quarterback in this region, and I think he'll definitely show that against St. Mike's on Friday.
Man, should I pick the huge upset here? Golly, what should I do? I know that if I pick Taos, that'll make Joey Fernandez very happy because he loves it.
Yes.
You know what? Just to stir things up here, I'm going to pick Taos with a monumental upset. And by that, you're welcome, Joey. You're welcome, St. Mike's, because now you've really got it. Yeah, I think Taos starts the season off with a huge shocker, and I think the reason being is maybe St. Mike's hasn't really been pushed a lot during the regular season. I mean, it's been a while since we've seen them pushed right to the very edge in the regular season.
Oh, you mean like their last game?
Well, that was the regular season. I'm talking
regular season. Okay, but I was going to say the last game they played, it was a damn near dogfight.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. It's you have to go back a ways. It does
That's
happen.
True. Yeah.
But I think look, I do think St. Mike's going to win. But just to be devil's advocate, I'm going to say Taos. Oh, I'll say Taos 30-27. Just do that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's going to be. Now
they're be great, man. Say they're going to shut them out like 34-0.
No, watch St. Mike's go up there and beat them 55-0 at halftime.
Probably. That's usually how it works.
Pewaukee at Crown Point. Look, Pewaukee is a playoff team last year, and they're going on the road to start things off. It's not exactly like driving down to Albuquerque to play El Dorado in week 1. It is a road game, and so there's that element to it. But how do you see that one coming out?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I think you or I could score a couple touchdowns against Crown Point with that Pewaukee team. So
just drop back and throw deep to Matt Dahlside down the sideline and just do that.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Just remember, Matt, just get out of bounds. Don't take the hit.
Yeah.
But no, I think they probably beat them. I think it'll be like a 52-0 game. This game should be over relatively early unless they decide to pull his starters out and get some of his younger guys in and try to get it to the fourth quarter. But yeah. I mean, they're easily, that one's kind of a no-brainer. I think a 50-point margin is about right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Crown Point might actually score on them just because you never know. Maybe they get a fumble return or get lucky and run a kickback or something like that. But yeah, I think it's in that 45-6 range. I think Pewaukee starts strong. Pewaukee is definitely a team that's trying to send a message, and we've seen it before. When they have a chance to put the hammer down, they usually do. Yeah. Los Alamos and Espanola, man, two teams that had such good seasons last year. Espanola, of course, state semifinals.
And interestingly, they're two teams that have a lot of question marks because lost their coach, and Los Alamos lost a lot of key players that they had from last year. But they still have Jordan Herrera, and he's in my mind, he's the best running back in the North. And if you can give him the ball 25, 30 times and ride him, you should be able to. I know that Espanola shut him out last year. I don't think that's going to happen this time around. I think it'll be a much closer game, and I'm going to go with Los Alamos. I'm going to go with them. I'm going to go with a 35-28 score.
Yeah, I think Espanola actually handles this one. Or I'm sorry, Los Alamos actually wins this game. I don't think it'd be all that close. I don't see it as a blowout, but I don't see Los Alamos blowing anyone out. They're that team that will keep the score around 30 points, but I'd say like a 34-14 type score. I think Los Alamos does have a chance to win 7-8 games during the regular season, what they did last year. It'll be interesting to see how the offense develops because they don't have that vertical passing game. But since when has Los Alamos ever really had a vertical passing game?
No, that's true. But they have changed things up though the last couple of years. They do try to throw the ball a little bit more out of that spread attack. Mm-hmm. They've gotten away from the double wing and the wishbone offenses that they've run in the past or the power eyes. So I think they're capable of putting points up on the scoreboard. So I think we'll see a glimpse of that on Friday night.
Now, Tatum Escalante is an 8-man game. Neither one of us really studied 8-man, so let's just skip right over that one. But Hatch Valley goes to West Las Vegas on Friday night, plays a 6:00 game. How do you see that? Because that's a couple of playoff teams from last year.
Yeah, and Hatch always seems to have a pretty solid team for the most part. So I think it'll be a good close game, especially because we don't really know what to expect out of West Las Vegas. When you have uncertainty in the quarterback position, you don't have those skill receivers like you did before. I know they got the ground game, and I'm sure that's what they'll lean on to get them through. I kind of see them winning this game, kind of 24-12. Keeping it relatively low scoring and trying to keep Hatch's defense on the field for as long as possible.
Yeah, I think West Las Vegas wins this game. I think that what they discovered something almost on accident last year at the end of the last season is they can run the ball really, really well. And so they lost it. They graduated their starting quarterback that they had for about 17 years, CJ Perea, who seemed to play there forever. He is gone. But at the end of last season, the Robertson game, I drove up to Vegas and watched that one where they ran the ball. I think the first 11 plays, which shocked everyone. But it turns out that they can actually run the ball, and they've kind of married themselves to the idea that they can run the ball between the tackles and get outside. They have the speed to do that. So I think you're going to see the evolution of a really strong running game in West Las Vegas. And I do like the personnel they have. They don't have a ton of guys. They've only got about a 40-man roster, but that's enough to win in 3A.
Yeah.
I think
they're
a team that could kind of burst out this year and make some noise. I think they do win that game. I think fairly comfortably. I think they win that. It's a tough road trip to come up here from the South for any team.
It is
driving that far. I think this is one of those 40-20 type games, but West Las Vegas, I think, is in control the entire time. That said, Hatch Valley's probably going to win. So sorry. Now the other team from Vegas has to go down south. They're going down to Socorro Robertson. First game under a new coach, new personnel, new starting quarterback. How do you see that? Because look, like we've said, Robertson is the big question mark.
Yeah, they still do have their offensive line should be pretty good. I think a little young in some places, but I think they're still pretty good on that end. Nathan Gonzalez gives them that element of being able to throw the ball and actually being able to see over his line. As a matter of fact, it was kind of funny watching him during practice. He was the tallest guy out on the field, man. And they've been used to having short quarterbacks, for so long. Lucas was like giddy that he had Lucas Sanchez, the head coach. He was giddy that he actually had a tall quarterback that he could use for once. But they're going to run the ball. He's got 3 or 4 running backs. They're going to control. They're going to do a little bit of ball control, and I think they probably beat Socorro probably 21-10, 21-14, something like that. It'll be a low scoring game, but I think Robertson's Robertson. They're still going to be tough to beat.
Yeah, I think until someone comes along and knocks Robertson right in the teeth, you still have to believe in them. I know new coach, last time we saw they had a coaching change, they didn't skip a beat. They went from Roadhouse to Coach Gonzalez, and they continued that run. So I think Robertson is a program that has had sustained success just because of it's a mindset inside the locker room to keep on playing. And just because you change a head coach doesn't mean these guys are going to quit being who they are. So I think Robertson does play well. I think Robertson's going to be tough. I think it's one of those years where both teams from Vegas can be very, very competitive in 3 at the same time, because usually they're kind of one team is a good step or two in front of the other. But I think they're both going to be pretty good this year. I think Robertson does win that game. Their season ended kind of traumatically at the end of the last season, losing to Dexter. So I think in a place like Vegas, those things carry over. So I think they go down, win that game, say in the neighborhood of like 30-14. I think they handle that one pretty easily. Friday night, man, you got Santa Fe High and the Jaguars, which is kind of like the Super Bowl for both those teams, because it's a win. It's a chance for bragging rights. The bragging rights of the two biggest schools in town. How do you see that one coming out?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I think Santa Fe High is just the better team right now. I mean, if they played this game at the end of the year, which is what they've done when they were both in the same district, I think I would be singing a different tune. But for right now, Capital's work in progress, and the team that they're going to be now is not who they're going to be once they get to October, especially if some of these young guys come around and start to develop. But I think tomorrow, I think Santa Fe probably wins that one. They won at 21-0 last year. I think something similar. Maybe 21-7. Maybe Capital scores a touchdown there, but I think Santa Fe High is clearly the better team right now.
Yeah, I would agree, because historically Santa Fe High, their best ball is usually played right up front, because there is a sense of optimism. It's before you get into that 6A grind and start kind of wearing you down a little bit, and whether it's attrition or injuries or just logistical stuff like turnover margin and all those things, you kind of get browbeaten a little bit. The deeper you go into a 6A schedule. So when they start things off, you're fresh out of camp. You got a new coach, a new system. I do. Yeah, they got some momentum coming into this thing, and it does mean a lot to Santa Fe High. And you're right, there are athletes at Santa Fe High. I don't know if you can compete with the La Cuevas and the Eldorados and the Sandias of the world, but you can definitely compete in the city of Santa Fe. Like they have the personnel to push St. Mike's, I think, as well. So I think Santa Fe High does win this game. I do think they do. I think they score some points. I think they can get it up in the upper 20s. But Capital is a team that has to prove that they can push the ball. They can score because they only had one game last year where their offense really took off, and it was against Del Norte. They scored 55 points against Del Norte. Everything else was just it was a tough sledding thing for them. I think Santa Fe High wins this game. I do think Capital does score a few points, but I could see it being like a 31-13 type game. I think Santa Fe High comes out of there with a win. So, nice start for the Demons. Where do they go from there? We'll see. So, and then Saturday, really, it's just a quiet day. And McCurdy plays Cobra.
McCurdy and Cobra.
Gosh, you got to drive all the way down to Bayard for that game, which is never
not fun.
Yeah.
But I mean, McCurdy's they made it to the 2A playoffs last year. And they probably should again. They're kind of one of those mid-level teams. Probably an 8, 9, 10 seed team. They've got they've got a solid group coming back from last year's squad. They won 7 games last year. They were 4-1 in their district.
Yeah, they're tied for the district championship.
So. Yeah. And they should be and that should be where they're at again, especially in that district. I mean, it's mostly a lot of a lot of the northern schools, the reservation schools there, Laguna, Cuba, Navajo Prep, and those are teams that they should they fare well against. And so I think they Cobra is a little rough, I think, from what I've heard from a couple of people that they don't exactly have great numbers right now, but they're a physical team usually. They usually have some pretty good size. I would give McCurdy a shot, maybe 21-20 to pull that one out there to start the year off.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Cobra just because it's a Saturday game, and by the end of it, it's going to be about 700 degrees because it is in southern New Mexico, and it's a long drive, man. It takes a lot out of you. I know that I'm sure they'll probably get down there Friday night and spend the night, but even then, it takes about 2 weeks to get there by bus from Espanola. Especially if you go through the Gila, man, it's going to be rough. I think Cobra wins that game, say 21 to maybe like 18 or 19. I think it'll be close, but home to give the advantage to the home team. Look, and we've only talked about football so far, but soccer kicks in. It starts right now this week. You got volleyball, you got cross country. Soccer by the end of this weekend is going to be in full swing. But what do you know about soccer? What are we expecting to see out of that?
Well, I think we can probably take the usual suspects. I mean, in 5A, I think in 5A you might see a little bit of a change. I think Santa Fe High and Capital both have decent shots at making the playoffs. Capital had a really young team last year. Most of those guys came back. I was talking to Alvin Valdez last night. Prior to their practice, because they were waiting on the Capital football team to finish up or to move on down to their other practice field. But he had 52 kids out this year. I mean, to try out for the football or for the soccer team, and he ended up having to cut, I think, about a dozen. So I mean, and that's the thing with Capital; they always have good numbers, so they're always going to have a good amount of athletes. And I think he's got a team here that's capable of competing against La Cuevas and the Eldorados. I think they might have a chance at being able to push them and maybe even push for to challenge in that district. Santa Fe High is a little bit different. They've got some good pieces coming back. I think defensively they'll be solid. The big problem is that you got to replace Chris Solano and Cy Anderson, who are the 2 top scorers there, and Evan Martinez. I mean, you lose your 3 best scorers right there, and guys with some size. I mean, they were all at least Solano and Evan Martinez. They were bigger kids that could kind of handle the physicality that you see in 5A soccer. They're probably going to be a little bit smaller up front, so I think they may struggle a little bit more to score. But defensively, I think they're going to be in a good spot. 4A Los Alamos is Los Alamos. They're going to be they're going to be in it. They're going to win that district just because. Although I think on the boys' side, Taos could give them a really good could push them this year, and they played 3 1-goal matches last year, including the state tournament. So Taos is probably right on the heels of Los Alamos in that district. But girls' side, it should be Los Alamos to win on that end. And 3A, my sleeper team this year in 3A is going to be St. Michael's. They haven't been very good the last couple of years. They were awful young. They just needed time to kind of grow and develop and just really mature. We saw it toward the end of last year. They won 6 of their last 7 matches. The only one they didn't win, they tied Santa Fe Prep, and they barely missed out on the playoffs because of a tiebreaker. They beat Monte del Sol last night 5-0. I think that kind of bodes well for them. They've got some, again, good young talent. They've got some good sophomores, some good juniors. I think that's a team that might challenge Santa Fe Prep for the district this year. And again, prep is prep. They're probably going to be the team to beat up north. They're probably going to be one of the top 3 or 4 teams in AAA, along with NIMI, Sandia Prep. In the past, Bosque School has been in that, but I think Bosque School, St. Mike's could be in that conversation right there. There's some, it could be very interesting to see how things play out once we get to October. But to me, I'm kind of high on St. Mike's on the boys' side, and on the girls. St. Michael's girls, they actually have 15 girls on the roster, so they actually have a little bit of depth, and they actually can sub girls out and give everybody a little bit of a break. I think they'll be right there in the mix with Santa Fe Prep, but to me, Santa Fe Prep's probably still the team to beat in that district. But then the question becomes, how far do they go? And it always kind of depends on the matchup. And for the last couple of years, the district champ in two AAA has always been in that 4-5 matchup, which usually means they end up playing each other, or they play a pretty good team. But then you get that semifinal game, you end up going up against whoever the 1 seed is, and it's usually Sandia Prep. So
yeah,
it's usually where the season ends, and I would presume. I don't think that will change that much this year.
So we don't need to go cover any soccer game. You just laid out the whole blueprint for us right there. So
well, check back with me in October, and we'll see how good I was.
It's wow, James just spilled the script for the entire season. All right, here we go. And volleyball, look, you can't mention volleyball in northern New Mexico without mentioning St. Mike's, the team that's.
Oh, come on, Horsemen will. Not all you're going to do. That's all is St. Mike's, St. Mike's.
I wasn't even aware that other schools had volleyball teams, but as anyone who reads in New Mexico knows, if there's a volleyball expert in the state, it's the guy sitting right here next to me on this podcast. James will randomly text me stuff about volleyball, and I'm like, yeah, I don't even know. You're speaking. I don't know. Yeah, you're speaking another language to me. I don't know what this is.
Even though it's in text form, I usually get the okay, that's interesting. Not
just
really.
Dot. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Whatever you say, man. Just turn your stories in, and we're good.
I mean, yeah, it's easy to say that St. Mike's will be the team to beat, and they probably will be. But really, I think in 3A, St. Mike's and West are probably the top 2 teams in AAA right now. I got to give a nod to Cobre. They had a really dynamic freshman last year, and obviously she'll be back again, and she'll be pretty good. So they'll be in the mix. But yeah, I mean, St. Mike's, West Las Vegas, I think those are the 2 teams you can really kind of pencil in to make deep runs. And I'll say this for 5A, Santa Fe High, they have the potential to be in the mix there. Cleveland lost a lot. La Cueva lost a lot. Las Cruces isn't as dominant as they have been, but they still got the best player in the state. But Santa Fe High has a pretty good group, and I think they can compete with just about anybody. It's just a matter of, can they win those games? I mean, it's one thing, when you're playing teams 25-23, 25-22, but their problem has been at times they end up on the wrong end of that, and that's something that they've got to change. They got to be able to win some of those post matches, and if they do that, they can make a deep run. They were 1 win away from getting to the semifinals last year, and I think this team's capable of getting pretty deep into the 5A bracket.
James Barron, probably the only person in the state that can tell you that Cobra has a really good freshman volleyball player last year. I'm pretty sure people in Bayard didn't even know that. That is the kind of deep level expertise James has about volleyball, which is just, it's like Rain Man good. So I defer all volleyball knowledge to you, good sir.
Don't get me started on cross country.
Oh yeah, well, you know what? We should.
Let's save it for next week. We need something to talk about next week.
Yeah, we'll save cross country for another day, because what I know about cross country is I think it involves running, and I think it's outside. So
and that's something Will Weber just does not do.
No, I don't run, and I don't ever go outside. So that's
and that's definitely not your sport, man.
So yeah, but that'll do it for this week. Cannot wait for high school football to start. Of course, college football season starts the following week. We can get into some of the Lobos.
And then you can talk about your Lobos.
Yeah, about going to Michigan. Yeah, the NCAA came down. They dropped the hammer on Michigan last week. Unfortunately, one of the rules that they put on Michigan was not that they had to forfeit to the Lobos. So sadly, UNM still has to go play that game.
Yeah.
So
the NCAA dropped the hammer on Michigan, and now next week Michigan's going to drop the hammer on the Lobos.
Yeah, going to beat them 904-3. That might be the final score. But we'll talk about that for another day. But look, as always, we came into this thing thinking we'd do like 20 minutes of podcast and cut Matt Dalside loose. We've been on for almost an hour. So
it's silently, yes.
Yeah, we went through another podcast without a real plan. we made it last for almost an hour. So good job, man.
Yeah, we're getting really good at dragging these things out.
It's almost like we get paid by the hour. Because
I know.
Lord. Look, that'll do it for this week. Just you'll see a lot of football news, a lot of soccer news later in the week. We'll touch on some volleyball stuff. So now that the high school sports season is here, we got 40 weeks in front of us for
that's it
between now and the end of May. So here we go. Strap it on. It's go time. The curtain's coming
It'll
up.
be fun, man.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.